Welcome to our second talk on the reality of God. And what we want to look at today is, can life have meaning without God? So, has modern ideologies killed the meaning of life? Why would a worldview without God be absurd, dishonest, and delusional? I would argue that without God as the foundation of life, it is hard, if not impossible, to find any ultimate meaning in existence. God is the foundation of true meaning. To create temporary meaning in one's own life is certainly possible, but will necessarily fail at the end and leave one empty. World history tells us, and we've seen that especially over the last 100 years or so, that without God, worldviews and ideologies fail. And I will demonstrate this a little bit later. So here are three arguments or reasons or perspectives why a worldview and ideologies fail without God. Firstly, from the atheists, and the conclusion that in this universe there is no meaning. And from the perspective that religion has collapsed, people now try to find meaning in new narratives. Thirdly, the argument that without God, life and meaning is absurd. Perhaps the only answer that we could find lies in the timeless truths of meaning embedded in creation itself. So let's look at the first one, at the atheist conclusion, there is no meaning in the universe. And I quote the words of Richard Dawkins, an English evolutionist and biologist, a very prominent atheist and writer of many books, amongst the most well-known, The God Delusion. And I quote his words: "The universe we observe, with its blind physical forces, genetic replication, has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music." As a materialist and atheist, one is forced to come to no other conclusion than what Dawkins did. To try and create meaning in life with this worldview, one has to be dishonest to your own beliefs and delude yourself, as ultimately there is no meaning. So how do you live a life with this conclusion? Live honestly without God. And here are some suggestions by very famous thinkers and atheists. And I quote Friedrich Nietzsche: "Face the absurdity of life and live valiantly." Or Bertrand Russell: "Come to terms with life by realizing the world is a terrible place." Or Albert Camus: "Honestly recognize life's absurdity and then live in love." Interestingly here, Frank Turek, a Christian apologist, would say, you have to steal from God to make sense of life. Love is an attribute of God, and to smuggle that in to give sense of your life, you're actually stealing from God to make sense of your senseless life. God is the only source of love. And that is the same principle as portrayed by Francis Schaeffer in his two-story universe. With a worldview that there is no God, you cannot live honestly. In other words, believing that there is no ultimate meaning in life and then be happy, but still the sword of no ultimate meaning is hanging over your head. You have to delude yourself to believe you can live honestly, happy and meaningful when there is ultimately no meaning. But people are desperate for meaning and will keep on searching for meaning. It is engraved into our souls. So secondly, we look at what Douglas Murray says, that people will try to find meaning elsewhere as religion collapses and has collapsed in many people's lives. I have a lot of respect for Douglas Murray. He's a British author and political commentator, associate editor of the British political and cultural magazine The Spectator. I think his insight into current issues, social and political, are just astounding. Quoting him is not as much about what he said or his own worldview, but much more what came out of his discussion about modern worldviews and the meaning of life. The link you can find at the bottom of this video. I quote Douglas Murray: "Something incredibly deep has happened in our societies, namely the collapse of the grand narratives. For the first time in human history, man has no explanation for what we are doing here, and no story to tell about what we should do, other than through other narratives, though weak, like accumulate as much money as you can and try to enjoy life," which, according to his own words, is very shallow. This reminds me of the writer of Ecclesiastes, meaningless, meaningless. And I quote his further words: "This is the consequence of the collapse of religion, which is very much irreversible now," according to him. "The collapse of all major political ideologies other than the capitalist economy, and recently a lot of confidence was lost in capitalism. We have run out of things to believe in and pretend to just find our own meaning in this world. People just get caught up in new ideologies." And what are these new ideologies, these justice movements that people are trying to find meaning in life again? Equal rights for women, LGBT rights, race rights, which are all good, but the products of liberal rights. According to Douglas Murray, each are more unstable than we are willing to admit. For example, being gay. Still a lot is unknown about this. We know little about trans people, of women's rights. Racial issues are deeply complicated and we don't know much about it. Thirdly, we can look at why life without God is absurd. William Lane Craig, a Christian apologist, says, and I quote, "Man is the only creature who asks why. Without God, the answers are dark and terrible. We are only the byproduct of nature, the result of matter plus time plus chance. There's no reason for our existence, and we will end up in death." Very little, if anything at all, of what an individual decides today and how he acts today, right or wrong, good or bad, will be remembered in 100 years' time. It will have no significance 100 years from now. Maybe for the rich and famous, or for remarkable things that they've done, that will be remembered. But even so, their day-to-day acts and decisions, their moral decisions, acts towards each other, love and kindness shown or withheld, will not be remembered in 100 years from now. It will all be forgotten into the endless space of time. William Lane Craig goes further and says, each individual will die, the whole human race and the universe will cease to exist. It will end up as a cold, dead, lifeless, lightless universe swallowed up by black holes. If the human race then ends up in nothing, with no conscious mind, knowing or remembering its existence, then the human race is ultimately nothing, has ultimately no meaning. So really, from a world without God, what you do today is only important to satisfy your selfish genes and propagate them to an ultimate meaningless end. The modern Western society, to a large extent, has lost its moral compass and has lost meaning in life. It tries to find meaning in social justice movements which in itself is good, but can never satisfy the yearning soul. So where can we find answers to this? Is it perhaps in the creation itself, in the timeless truths with meaning in the Creator, who said, "I am the way, the truth of life"? The struggle to find meaning is not new. It has been forever in the hearts of men. Round about 950 before Christ it was written, "Meaningless, meaningless," says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labor at which they toil under the sun? And around 400 after Christ, St. Augustine wrote that there is a God-shaped void in each human that only God can fill. I quote again from the scriptures. "Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so does the other." The conclusion of the writer at the end of this chapter of Ecclesiastes, where he pointed how meaningless life is, comes to a meaningful conclusion. Fear God with awful reverence, knowing that He is Almighty, and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of man. So what are His commandments? Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself." So, why should we regard wisdom of thousands of years ago? Because 2 and 2 equals 4. This has been true for millions of years. In fact, it's been true, always been true, and will always be true. Truth does not depend on time. And God is omnipresent. God is always present in all time and all space, all the time at the same time, even as Christ lives in the hearts of men today. Furthermore, Christianity can be investigated for its truth. It is the only religion not based on blind faith, like Buddhism, Hinduism, Baha'i faith, which are all really an endless search for the ever-evading enlightenment. Nor is it based on fear like Islam, fear of hell, fear of the consequences suffered through family and friends if the faith is renounced. But Christianity is based on historical facts and a personal encounter with God. If God has made us to His image, then we have a free will to love and not to dance to our DNA, to propagate our genes, as said by the atheist Dawkins. We are free to appreciate the beauty in creation, free to enjoy music and art, and find endless delight in recognizing our loving Creator in these facts of life. We can know and experience that He has a plan for our lives now and eternally. And what does eternal life mean? Eternal life is the existence in the presence of a loving and good God forever. As I've mentioned, Christianity is the only religion that can be factually investigated. If in doubt, think about the most important question ever asked in history. "But what about you?" Jesus asked. "What and who do you say I am?" In the words of C.S. Lewis, atheist turned Christian, there are only 3 possible answers here. Either he was a lunatic, thinking that he was God, or he was a liar, deceiving the world, or he was Lord and God. So I urge you to investigate the facts, the evidence for the resurrection, the reliability of the New Testament, and the manuscripts the ancient manuscripts underlying the truth. Investigate the prophecies. Everything you think that Christians just accept as true. There are good, reliable evidence for each of these. I urge you not to base your conviction to reject Christianity and the Bible on blind faith in uninvestigated concepts that might be in your mind, but investigate the Bible, investigate Christianity, and find the truth. Because God says, seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart.